All right, thank you so much for joining our session today. These workshops are kind of sequenced. This one is on advocacy, and tomorrow we'll have another one on comprehensive supports, which a lot of it is about advocacy. So the discussions that will be happening at our tables are really starting points that if you choose to come to that next session tomorrow on comprehensive supports for people with disabilities, there'll be an opportunity to build on that discussion and kind of move to the next step. Our objectives for our session today are, number one, to encourage folks to start thinking about the implementation. And of course, a lot of the parts of the strategy are around encouraging others to take action. And that's around advocacy, and how do we do that? The second is to remind ourselves that a lot of the tools, the campaigns that are out there, the dreams that we have really for a more inclusive society are already there. We don't, as the Deputy Minister said, we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. We can build on the work that others have done, and really that's what we encourage, is to hear from each other what has been done, how it's worked, and then how we can build and be most efficient in our actions. We also are wanting to bring the focus really to the workplace and the community. And in a way, that's building bridges, that's linking with each other, that's involving others in these issues and the passions that you feel so strongly about. And the last of the objective for our session is to link with the pillars of the strategy, and more specifically with objectives that are within that pillar. So, as Ron mentioned already, at the tables, you have a card which represents one of the 5 main objectives within that pillar of comprehensive supports for people with disabilities. And the discussion is really about moving any one of those objectives forward, and oftentimes building on things that we're already involved in, sometimes just in our own silo, that we share that objective with the folks across the street. Let's work together. Let's start making plans. Let's build relationships where we're working on some of these issues together more broadly. And in light of that is we have a panel of amazing people who have done a lot of the work. All of us are getting to be a little bit gray-haired, and we have learned a few things along the way. So you'll be hearing from each one of them a little bit about the work they've done, they've been involved in, they've seen, and we provide that opportunity for you to kind of say, okay, geez, I really like what's going on with Yuta there in Manitoba. I wonder if we can do that in our province. Making those links afterwards, finding where you can get that information and support, and then being able to facilitate moving forward on that kind of thing. So our panelists today, in the order I believe in which they're going to speak, is Neil Blanchet, who is the Executive Director of the British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability Society. He will be followed by Yuta Frick, the Executive Director of the Disability Issues Office, the province of Manitoba. And wrapping up will be Bill Adair, the National Executive Director of the Spinal Cord Injury Canada. They all have amazing careers and accomplishments, but we want to hear from them rather than hear about them. So I want to invite Neil up to kick us off, or where he is.
Thanks, Ron. Does this thing work? Oh, Steve, sorry, I called him wrong. So before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Algonquin people who are meeting on today, and to say that my hair was brown until I started working with Bill Adair. And so just a little background about the organization that I work for. We're a Indigenous disability organization. We work in a number of areas. Employment, I wouldn't say, is our main focus, but we certainly do work in some employment aspects and work with other organizations to help the people that we serve in gaining employment. So I just want to give you a background on the Indigenous sector in Canada, just for those of you who may not be familiar. So in Canada, we have approximately 630 First Nations. We have 53 Inuit communities, and we have the Métis, who have recognized territory in Alberta. So we have approximately 1.6 million Indigenous people in Canada. That makes up about 5% of our total population. And that is about 980,000 First Nation, 65 Inuit, and about 588,000 Métis people. So approximately 1,110,000 of those individuals are persons of working age, 15 to 64. And we know that the rate of disability within the Indigenous population of Canada is probably around 33%. However, it's probably higher because we don't actually have adequate statistics within First Nations communities. Statistics Canada doesn't go in there. So this means if we apply it to the working age 15 to 64, there's probably about 550,000 Indigenous persons of working age living in Canada. Or 366,000, sorry. So, as many of you may know, the unemployment rate for Indigenous people are quite a bit higher than the non-Indigenous population. Completion of high school, technical school, university is lower as well. And we deal with systemic issues of discrimination, racism, misconceptions about the benefits and systems that we work within, major transportation issues, largely due to locations of communities, remote communities, isolated communities, poverty and its resulting effects, housing, and of course other barriers. We often see within the employment sector that we're told that if you want to get a job, you can get a job, and all you have to do is pull up your boots and you can get that job. All it takes is a lot of strong work on yourself. If you want a job, there's no problem doing it. We know that's not true, and we know that, like in the strategy, there's a number of things that have to be in place. You have to look at the person in a holistic view and look at all their needs so that they can be successful in employment. That's housing. Well, I got 2 more minutes. I got 7 minutes now. Good. And all the things that you're aware of. And I just want to go. So the Assembly of First, there's 5 Indigenous leadership groups in oh, I got 2 minutes left. Sorry. There's five Indigenous leadership groups in Canada. The Assembly of First Nations is one. The Métis National Council is the other one. ITK for Inuit is the other one. The Congress of Aboriginal People, and the Native Women's Association of Canada. So when we're talking about engagement and how we want to engage the Indigenous sector in the strategy and in employment, these are some organizations that we may want to continue to work with. They all have different employment initiatives, but realistically, if we want to include the Indigenous side, we have to work directly with communities. And that's 630 communities, First Nations communities, the Inuit communities, 53, and the Métis. And that's a one-to-one relationship. These are political organizations, the 5 that I spoke about, who have a bigger mandate, and they can't get down to the community level. So the AFN, although being the representative organization for the 630 nations, each nation has their own leadership, and they have their own priorities when it comes to employment. They might have their own employment programs, and that's why that unique and personalized relationship has to be there. And it can't be a relationship where you're looking to fulfill contracts, or you're looking to fulfill having an Indigenous side of your contract, or if it looks good on paper. As communities and as Canadians, we have to embrace the Indigenous side. We have to work in partnership with them and be there, whether it's employment related or not. And that's how we establish trust, and that's how we move forward. We have to learn about the history. We have to learn what impacts, and we have to learn about the systems that they work within federally and provincially. And most organizations, most service providers, and most employers don't stop talking. Do that. But I've got 17 more pages. I'm going to take Jim's stuff. So, anyways, and I should have talked faster, but they made me slow down over there. So, there's.
I was told to give you a warning. I wasn't told what to do if you ignored me.
Exactly. So, I will finish up, but if I can give you one message, it's that relationship that we have to build. And we talk a lot about the CRPD in Canada, and it's a very important document to be sure, but the government has also embraced UNDRIP as well, and it has an employment component there too. So we have to take a look at that, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons, and as well as the Truth and Reconciliation considerations as well. Those are not in the strategy now, and I know we're not revamping the strategy, but for whatever we do and however we do it, those are things we have to be aware of as well, and we have to be able to embrace those and move forward. And that's the only way that we'll truly have inclusive communities and be able to support each other in employment. And if you look around the room here today, there's very few Indigenous organizations and Indigenous people here. And even though the strategy does say we're going to work with First Nations, and it says First Nations, it doesn't say Inuit or Métis, have they intersected with the AFN's workplace strategy? Have they intersected with the Indigenous employment strategy, skills and training development strategy? All those things that I would wonder about. So if we're going to be inclusive, and this is going to be a pan-Canadian strategy, those are steps we have to take. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's not often I pick up a tagline for my comments from a notepad, but I did today. It's the only time. The notepad is titled "Power of Many." So my comments really are to provide you with 4 points of steps that you can follow to bring about change. And first, it's important to note that people with disabilities represent 22% of the population. That's 7 million people in our country. So when you talk about the power of many and bringing some unity to that community, asking for change, asking for improvements, that's really the secret to success. It's not really a secret. So anyway, here are the 4 steps. The first step is it's important to write a clear statement of what support we want from all 3 levels of government. What is it we're asking for? The second step is to explain how this investment will increase employment and the benefits of this increase. So what will the impact be socially and economically? The third one is the most important one, and that is build a community of support to meet with, call, and write the various levels of governments to ask for action on supporting the clear request for support. So how do we go about building that community of support? Well, there's a significant community of support around this conference. So not just the people at this conference, but the members of the organizations, and harnessing the enormous power and the impact that individuals can have who are members of various organizations is substantial. Also, in terms of building a community of support, I suggest connecting with other networks in order to expand that influence. So bring more people in to the situation and asking for the change to be implemented. Neil recommended and was speaking about Indigenous peoples. He mentioned BCANS and Native Women's Association, AFN, and others. Very powerful group there to join forces with the changes that we'll be asking for at the 3 levels of government. Another example would be a coalition that is under development right now, and the title I might offer is Building an Accessible Canada. And there are 105 organizations and over 2,700 individuals who are involved with this community, and also known as Include-Me. Right now, an hour ago, we launched a campaign and was initiated by one of our partners, the Canadian Association of the Deaf, and Frank Foligno is here as the chairman of the board of directors, we want the speech from the throne tomorrow in the Senate to have ASL and LSQ right next to the Governor General and to the Prime Minister. So we contacted our community an hour ago and asked them, invited them if they shared this vision, to please write the Prime Minister, the Governor General, Minister Quattro, and to the Speaker of the Senate. So within the last hour, there's 340 letters have gone to these 4 individuals, 400. And it's also important to know that when you're undertaking activities of this nature, it's important for the government to know about it. So we were able to speak with Minister Quattro earlier yesterday, and as she said this morning, please push us. So this is the kind of thing she would like to see done, but needs more support from the community. The final thing I can offer is to develop a strategy so there's a systematic approach to the 3 levels of government. Find your key spokespeople, have them take the message in, the request into the government in a coordinated way, and then bring in the community of support who can voice their encouragement for implementation of the strategy that's been recommended. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jutta Frick, and I'm the director at the Disabilities Issues Office in Manitoba, where we're rolling out accessibility legislation that follows the model of Ontario. But what I want to talk to you about is, I think, the other side of the coin, which is the advocacy movements that created the Disabilities Issues Office, and I have a member of Manitoba League of Persons with Disabilities here. That's why we have an office. And the reason why we have accessibility... okay. That's a 5-minute thing, gets to your head. Accessibility legislation is also the result of advocacy. And what I want to talk to you about is Disability Matters Vote campaign. And to keep me from speaking too quickly, just look at it online, Disability Matters Vote, Google it, and you will see videos of thousands of Manitobans who, in this last election in October and the previous election 3 years ago, got the vote out. And I think that it's a demonstration of what Bill was talking about. I'm sorry if I'm hiding against this. Maybe put it someplace else. So basically, it was a clear message. First of all, it was a coalition. Barrier Free Manitoba is a coalition of 80 organizations, equality-seeking, so not only disability, equality-seeking organizations. And they pushed accessibility legislation. But when it came to getting more people together, and these lawn signs, there were more, that was my own lawn sign, there were more of these signs during the election than there were any party signs. They were at every corner. I have a T-shirt that I'm not wearing today that just, lots of different things. And campaigns by postcard. When we got legislation in Manitoba, that campaign was actually international. So their clear messaging includes the message that we're talking about here today: timely access to disability services, unleashing the employment potential of people with disabilities, and a dignified income for persons without employment. The outcome of this broad coalition with a clear message and clear people leading it is that one of the only debates that all parties, including the incumbent, which is conservative and wasn't participating in elections, the only one where all 4 parties participated was on disability. And it was the minister who's responsible for accessibility legislation. Huge outcome. The election happened. The Conservative government was re-elected. One of the first things the Premier did is he invited folks from Disability Matters Vote to his office to discuss what he was going to do going forward to meet those needs, including, I have a small office of 5 rolling out accessibility legislation. It took us 5 years to roll out the first standard and second, and now I've got 3 that I'm rolling out by next December. So the movement, the push is on. And one of the things that the Premier committed to in his 100-day action plan was to separate out income support from EIA. So that is going to be separated, which is something that has been lobbied for a long time, but it's the Conservative government that is doing it because he is responsive to the voters, 1 in 4 of which in Manitoba have a disability, all of whom are attached to someone with a disability. So your voice matters, and please go to this website to see the thousands of people getting involved. I spoke to someone yesterday here, a Manitoban, who said how she got to know her neighbors because they had this disability vote sign on it, and she's Shelley Fletcher, if you know her from People First, and didn't know that her neighbors were interested. So this is what is happening in Manitoba. So that's one thing, work with these guys. Another, from the perspective of working in the Disabilities Issues Office, where I have 5 staff in comparison to Ontario with 100. Manitoba's strength, and I think other smaller provinces here, is our networks. We all know each other. So the people who lead this campaign are also my friends. I know them from other areas of life. And in that kind of networking way, work with the business community. For instance, the Retail Council of Canada has a federal presence. They're helping us with legislation. The Hotel Association. Those are the leaders that can make a difference and are already complying with the Ontario standards. So know your allies, bring them on board. Another one for employment is the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources that for the first time this year in Manitoba are introducing an accessibility award. So don't preach to the converted, get that message out to the people that need conversion. Thanks.